Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. Long time no see. Today marks the second day of Donald Trump's second presidency and final presidency, barring any type of constitutional changes. It's been a long time since I've seen you guys. I last made a video discussing the 2024 election results and my 2024 prediction. And looking back on this very tumultuous past 2 months, this has been a very big change for the American public. So I took a break off from YouTube. I apologize for that. I know I promised you guys daily uploads. We are getting right back into that, full force ahead into the next 4 years. But what we are going to be talking about just briefly is a big reason why I wanted to wait until Donald Trump was inaugurated was this transitory period, if I can get that word out correctly, this transitory period in which we will be seeing, everything that Donald Trump talked about from November onward really ushered into reality in these first few days. And I really felt that this was going to be the moment where it's no longer the lame duck session of Biden's administration. We were starting to see the exit of all the administration officials and all of the, final pardons and the final initiatives and the final tasks and all those different things. And I felt it would really be timely to start creating videos today, roughly 1 to 2 days into the Trump administration. Now, I'm not sure how many of you guys watched the inauguration yesterday. I watched the speech, went through it. The New York Times has a really good annotated piece on it, too, if you want to really understand some of the more nitty-gritty stuff about the Trump admin. But the TLDR is here. Donald Trump is coming into the Oval Office with a record high approval, as well as the fact that he is ushering this to be the golden age of America. Now, there are a number of different things that Donald Trump talked about in his speech yesterday. Just to name a few, looking at what was really the big focus of the 2024 campaign was a lot of things surrounding immigration, the economy, different things that Donald Trump said were better under his administration the first time. And he really emphasized that in this speech. There were a number of things mentioned in the speech yesterday, ranging from, discussions around America First policies. Makes sense. Talking about mass deportations. That was a very big part of this administration. And it looks like this is something that is going to start today across the country. Looking at, who gets the distinction of terrorist in the United States. Which type of person, which type of group would Donald Trump determine to be a terrorist group? Talking about his survival of the assassination attempt that took place back in July. Talking about social policies, declaring in his inauguration speech that there are two genders in the United States, male and female. That's what he said. Looking at a number of different things, it is ranging from economic policy to border policy to social policy. It was all encompassing, which makes sense. Your inauguration speech is largely going to cover what you plan to tackle for the next 4 years, but really a lot too that was very ambitious. The renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. That's something that Donald Trump, wanted to do and tried to do through executive order. These are all different things that have been mentioned in the speech yesterday and done directly through the inauguration speeches. In fact, you can go to the Time website. They have broken down all of the 26 different executive orders that Donald Trump signed into law yesterday, and you can break it down. It's really helpful to understand in these first few days, this is going to be the biggest part of the Trump admin. Now, if you're wondering, what will the content be focused around today? I apologize. There's no real objective of this video, given that it's the first one of this new administration, but similar to what we did during the Biden admin. That was my first time covering an administration earlier on. Meaning that in 2017, when I founded this channel, this was right around the time we were 6 months in, I think, or maybe 5 months in to the Trump admin. I founded it June of 2017. So the Biden admin was the first one. And so what we started to do then was the first 6 months were a lot about the honeymoon, a lot about what does it mean for these special elections that are taking place. I mean, we just saw Marco Rubio is now Secretary of State. There will be a Florida election shortly, and we'll be talking about that, right? We'll be talking about the implications of what a 5-point race would mean versus a 25-point race. Also, just taking a look, too, at approval. We did a lot of approval updates for the Trump admin and the Biden admin. It was very, very common. We talked about that range when Biden started office, had a net 23% approval, meaning more people approved than disapproved. Ended up with nearly the polar opposite, nearly a 43-point swing from January 2021 to January of 2025. So massive, massive changes in direction for President Biden, very similarly for Donald Trump. So it'll be a lot of coverage there. And then, of course, we're going to get right into the 2026 elections, the 2025 elections too. You can see Virginia's up, New Jersey's up. And again, remembering back on the 2024 election results, we'll be spending a lot of time over the next few weeks really doing, a dive deep into the 2024 election. Where are the shocks for Democrats? Where are the shocks for Republicans? Why was it that Donald Trump was able to win the popular vote as the first Republican to do so, since the year 2000, the second time ever in the 21st century that a Republican won the popular vote? We'll be unpacking all these different things, but of course, a focus on the future, not always the past. We'll talk about the past, very relevant, but 2025, 2026, these are right around the corner, and 2028 even. I know it sounds crazy, and I know you're exhausted, and I apologize. I promise we won't be spending too much time talking about 2028 this year, but the races shape up early, and the big reason for that is that no matter who is in office, 2028 is going to be an open race, meaning that there's not going to be an incumbent Republican. There's not going to be an incumbent Democrat. Obviously, J.D. Vance will probably run for president. That's a question. Maybe Vice President Harris or Vice President Vance and Vice President Harris might match up again in 2028. I don't know, right? These are all things that are left up to speculation. But the 2028 race is going to start far earlier than I think we will think about because of the fact there is no incumbent, right? It's a very different thing when you have an outgoing incumbent versus 24. We had Biden, 2020. We had Trump, 2016. That was the last open race. And when did that start off? Roughly 2 years out. And arguably even everyone knew Secretary Clinton would run in 2013. And so that was a very, very early on race. Anyways, getting back to what we're talking about here, it is pretty much going to be a wide range. What you can expect is a big conversation around Trump's policies. We're going to talk about what he did, the pushback he's receiving, these legal challenges, what this means, because right now, Donald Trump is coming into this, and we'll talk about this more extensively as we start to get more approval polls on the job approval, because right now we're only working with favorability. And I want to be clear here. There is a distinction between favorability and approval, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But what we'll be looking at today is the favorability ratings of Trump and tracking it over time. Like I said, this is the best numbers. These are the best numbers that Donald Trump has seen in quite some time. Never before in Donald Trump's history as a candidate or a president has his favorability rating been this high. Never before has 46.4% of the nation or higher said that they have a favorable view of Donald Trump. Even when he won in 2016, his favorability rating was in the low to mid 30s going into that race. Inched it up to around 40%, but it wasn't enough to say that he was favored more than unfavored. And while it still isn't there, this is the honeymoon phase that he did not receive in 2017 when he came into office. In 2017, if we remember, and I wasn't, again, making videos then, so there's no video on this channel talking about it, but he had a week where he was approved in terms of approval, but favorability rating was in a very low point. Today, Donald Trump has a favorable view by the 46.4% of the nation, which is roughly on par with the vote share he received back in 2020. A 1.6% difference here. Very, very different than any other time that Trump has been a candidate or even has been president of the United States. Now, J.D. Vance still runs behind him, and that's largely because, one, J.D. Vance doesn't have as much name ID, and two, because J.D. Vance is on his own right, someone who people do not give the same, viewpoint as Donald Trump, because J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are not the same people. The same reason why Mike Pence didn't share the same exact approval as Donald Trump when they were in the Oval Office together, because people separate the candidates. They see J.D. Vance in one way, they see Donald Trump in the other way. And in some cases, most cases, it works to Donald Trump's benefit. Now, the big reason why I said there's a distinction between approval and favorability is because what we will be talking about over the coming weeks and coming months is Donald Trump's approval rating. That's very different. Approval rating has to do with, okay, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. How do you view him doing the job as president of the United States? And that could be very different than, do you like the guy, right? When it came down to people like President Obama, you very often saw that there was a difference between favorability and approval. Very often, voters liked Obama. For the majority of his administration, they liked him as a person, as a guy. When it came down to job approval rating, for about half of the administration, they said they did not like the job that he was doing. You would see constantly poll after poll after poll saying, Obama's a nice guy. I don't think he should be president. Obama's a nice guy. He botched Obamacare. Obama's a nice guy. He did bad with X, Y, and Z. That happens, right? For Donald Trump, they largely coincided with each other because people often associated Donald Trump and the presidency as one and the same and did see Donald Trump as someone who they might have been voting for. But in many cases, was the similar case in 2016, saw him in some cases as morally, right, wrong, as someone who has done things that are wrong. Right after January 6th, you can see that at that point in time, his favorability rating had hit a record low. Well, his approval rating was actually higher than this. People might have thought he did a good job, but they thought he was wrong for the part that they thought he played in January 6th. But over time, the Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself have changed the way that Americans view him. Right around 2023, the favorability rating wasn't high. And this is a large time, too, that you were seeing attacks from Republicans and Democrats. But as we got closer and closer to the 2024 election, the Trump campaign narrowed it. By the point we had reached the election, Donald Trump had just 9 points separating the unfavorable and the favorable. A year prior, when you're taking a look at 2023, you can see that number was 5 points higher. And a year prior to that, you can see that it was even higher then. And that was in the 2022 midterms when Republicans arguably lost very winnable races. But it was the fact that Donald Trump was able to bring it in and getting back to that point of approval rating, right? When it comes down to approval, the only poll out here, and that's why I'm not giving it much stock, and we're not making a video on just this one insider advantage, which is historically a Republican pollster. We'll talk about it in a large sense in a week, but I can guarantee you the numbers are going to be very good for Donald Trump, given that we are in 1, a honeymoon phase, and 2, record high approval rating for the president of the United States. But you can see Donald Trump approved plus 17. So in this insider advantage poll, when you're looking at how people view Donald Trump, now I guess they didn't do a coinciding one, but you will see here that the unfavorability rating often is higher than the approval rating, or rather that the net here is worse for Trump than the approval rating will be. And that's going to be interesting. When you're looking at this first term, it's really interesting too that we're going back and forth on this. Donald Trump ended, right, with disapprove plus 11. That was the last poll YouGov and The Economist. Well, we can literally see here what his last one was around that time frame for favorability. It was worse for favorability than it was for job approval. Now, you're going to see massive, massive differences. Because I think a lot of people, too, in reality, what we're looking at is a massive change in support from 2020 to 2024. I don't agree with Donald Trump that it's a landslide, nor do I think 2020 was a landslide, nor do I think 2016 was a landslide. I would not even argue that 2012, when Obama won 332 electoral votes, that was a landslide either. But it was a victory, and it's a victory that comes with a mandate. While the majorities may not be massive, the majorities exist because voters wanted Republican leadership. The majorities exist because Donald Trump and the joint effort of the NRSC, which is the National Republican Senatorial Committee, that's the wing responsible for all the Senate races, and the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, which is responsible for all the House races. They did coordinated efforts that won them Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, that won them numerous races in the House races. They were able to take a Senate that was 51 to 49 in favor of the Democrats and turn it into being 53 to 47 in favor of the Republicans. They flipped Ohio. Bernie Moreno's in there. They flipped Montana. Tim Sheehy is in there. I mean, you saw Democrats lost, right? And obviously the Joe Manchin to Jim Justice flip was already guaranteed. And while sure some Democrats held on, and that's what we'll talk about in terms of what are the few, but surely are there silver linings for Democrats and what were the large electoral victories for Republicans, which is much greater and much bigger in volume. I mean, that's what's going to be the point of conversation here. But I will say, there was clearly a very strong campaign on the Republican side. Something that many of us missed. I missed. I talked about this in my most recent video, talking about my 2024 election prediction, which I admit was wrong, right? I predicted Harris would win. She did not win, right? And that's the whole thing about this. These models exist because they are supposed to capture what I believe the sentiment was at the time. Well, clearly, that was wrong. We saw that too with FiveThirtyEight. We saw that too with other networks that were predicting the race wrong, and it's about what they missed. Regardless, though, we have to look forward, right? Looking at Trump's numbers, looking at this new White House, looking at this next 4 years, which feels very reminiscent of 2017 to 2021, except this time, Donald Trump has more of a mandate, right? They flipped the Senate. They didn't do that in 16. They had a trifecta, and they have one now, but Donald Trump also was out for blood. Donald Trump, and not a practical sense, right? I don't want to make it seem that that's me saying it practically, but what I do believe is that Donald Trump clearly has things that he wants to do. And he set the record yesterday for the most executive orders signed ever. They railed against Biden for having 8 in his first day. Yesterday was 26 for Donald Trump. I think it might actually be more than that, but I think it was 26 if I'm getting my numbers, pinpointing them correctly. Regardless, though, most executive orders signed in a first day of the presidency, at least in modern history. On top of that, too, there are a lot of things that we are going to see. Way too much that will be really weighing down on this administration very early on, and I'm not trying to say that it's doomed to fail. I believe that this is the most put together, version of the Trump campaign / White House in the 2015 to 2025 history of Donald Trump's dominance on electoral politics and political relevance, because it wasn't dominance in 2020, but it was political relevance. And so all of these things are coming together, and I think they will be massive forces to be reckoned with by Democrats, but also with the American public. That we will see approval ratings fluctuate. We will see what happens and what it means for the 25 elections. Does this mean Winsome Sears is done in Virginia if Trump is down 15 nationally like he was in 2017? That resulted in Ralph Northam winning by 11 points. Does this mean Democrats will have the 2026 year in the House that they've been looking for, like 2018 when they gained 35 seats? Does this look like Democrats will have the 2028 election that they were looking for in 2024, or the 2020 redux where Democrats are winning back because voters are tired of Trump? These are going to be questions that will be answered, and I really invite you to join me on this journey. Because we're not going to be doing any immediate election predictions. It takes time to do those. We didn't do that in 2021. We'll do a lot of speculation. We'll talk about what's the future for Vice President Harris. We'll talk about what's the future for J.D. Vance. What's the future for Vice President Vance, rather. I'm trying to use official titles when I refer to these people so it's more clear, one, who I'm talking to, and two, the prominence of their role, what it means for electoral sense of just something that I've personally been trying to do. But regardless, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028 will be on our minds, and so will the Trump White House. Because everything they've been doing and everything they will continue to do will be very relevant for the next 4 years in terms of what happens for both parties. And it'll be very interesting to see how Donald Trump engages with the American public, how it lands and is received by the American public, because that will make or break Republican and Democratic politics over the next 4 years. And while it may have been obvious, I wanted to say it because, one, I wanted to, and two, because I think it needs to be stated clearly that Donald Trump will be the driving factor in American politics for the next 4 years. And while that may be tiresome for many Democrats and Republicans out there, or people who have just closely watched the first Trump admin, this is how second terms work. Donald Trump has been this big force that has been controlling of the either federal government or the Republican Party for the past 10 years. And things are not going to change over the next 4. So I encourage you to follow along on this journey with me. We'll be covering a lot of different things, talking about a lot of different things, and I'm excited to be back. So we'll be talking a lot about 2024, looking back, all the things that I said. Don't want to waste your time at all, but you know what I'm going to talk about, and I'm really excited to do it. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. No recommended playlist. YouTube's going to put one up automatically. They do my end screens there for me. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. If you are interested in following along for the election cycle for this cycle, I would really encourage that you do so. I'm really excited to get back into it. Discord server in the bottom left, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, revamping all of these for the next cycle for this election, for this administration. I encourage you to check out there. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.